Let's talk about blended families and what estate planning is appropriate if you are part of a blended family. So you have children from a prior relationship, your spouse has children from a prior relationship, and perhaps you have joint children together. You're a blended family. So what kind of estate planning works best in this situation? Well, oftentimes people simply have wills that are called, I call them I love you wills. So when the first spouse dies, everything goes to the surviving spouse outright with no protections, because you believe that your surviving spouse will do right by your kids, right? I can tell you, and you've probably known this and you've seen this in people you know and friends, that doesn't always happen. Oftentimes what we see is that the first spouse dies, the surviving spouse gets everything, and then you know what? The kids, you're the first spouse to die, end up getting nothing because the surviving spouse, for whatever reason, doesn't have a close relationship or just doesn't want to provide for your kids. Your kids get nothing. And perhaps the surviving spouse's kids get everything. Or another thing that we see happening is, all right, now the surviving spouse remarries again. And what do? They have another poorly written estate plan that's an I love you will. And what it says is that the new spouse gets everything on the death of, who was a surviving spouse. And then what happens to the assets? Well, they go to the family of this new spouse you've never met. Your kids get nothing for sure. Your surviving spouse's kids get nothing. And it's this whole new family, gets what was your assets and your spouse's. This actually happens. It's not that uncommon. Why? Because the wills didn't have trusts put in them. So how do you correct this so that it never happens to you and your kids? You're in a blended family. You and your spouse each have a will, and the will says on the death of the spouse, everything pays to a trust for the surviving spouse. So the assets are there, the money is there. Depending on the circumstances, the surviving spouse can even be the trustee, or maybe you don't want the surviving spouse to be the trustee. That's to be, talked about with your estate planning lawyer. And then all your assets are in the trust for your surviving spouse. Let's say your surviving spouse remarries. Your surviving spouse cannot redirect those assets. Whatever happens in your surviving spouse's life, your surviving spouse changes the will, whatever happens, that money in the trust that was your money, it was your money. You died first, money went into the trust. On the surviving spouse's death, it goes where you say it should go, which maybe it goes to your kids or goes wherever you say, but it will go in that direction. Especially if you don't give what's called limited power of appointment to redirect those assets out of the trust. Those assets will go where you say they go. And that's how you can ensure that those you care about will inherit from you ultimately. So if you are part of a blended family, you do not want an I love you will. You want a will that has trusts in it so that you can ensure your assets go where you want them to.